After I got married and moved to London, I started my journey as a teacher from London. So, like properly trained teacher from London. So it taught me, what are the best ways that you can actually make an impact on a child through education. So I realized then that this is my calling, that I have to be part of education and I should be able to gather as much information as I can and help out children to make themselves a better citizens of the future. So, yeah, I had my daughter there and I was expecting my second one. And I suddenly told one day to my husband that, I want to go back to India. So, yeah, I know it was not very easy to convince because, when you are in a developed country where education for your children and all the other amenities are quite advanced compared to where you come from. So it was a little difficult to convince everybody why I would want to go back to India. And then they were questioning about what I wanted to do going back to India. So I said I wanted to start a school because I wanted to be in that vanguard where, someone who can create that difference for the children and for their better, outlook of their future. So I wanted to be in that. I know it wasn't easy. So we sold our house in London and used that money to start a school in India. And I started it as a kindergarten school and slowly improved that to K-12 currently, kindergarten to 12th grade, like high school now. So this year. So my approach towards education was always very practical, I should say so, because I'm not only a founder member of the school, but I also teach in my school. So initially I was teaching English and mathematics, and then 3-4 years ago, I started teaching social studies as well. You must be wondering, how can somebody randomly go and teach social studies? They need to be qualified to teach social studies. But I wanted to set an example to my teachers that once a teacher will be able to remain a teacher no matter whatever task that they take up, let it be mathematics or social studies or English. So I wanted to set an example for my existing teachers that we should not limit ourselves saying that I am English teacher, I can't teach social studies, or I am a math teacher, I can't teach something else. All we have to do is prepare ourselves so that we are not misguiding our students and are able to create that impact. So before teaching social studies, most of the time, whenever I was interacting with students, they would come and tell me why I think social studies is the most boring subject. Or why do we have to learn history? Because it's already gone and done and dusted. We don't have to know about or remember so many dates about history. So these were the questions from my students while they were interacting with me. So I somehow felt I need to be able to showcase where can they use all this information. So I used to invite people from across the world to interact with my students from the beginning itself. I think I should say we were one of the early users of Google Hangout to invite people from different parts of the world to interact with our students in the school. Because for me, I felt you can actually learn from your school through the eyes of, through the eyes of the world. I felt always that because we don't have to teach everything within the four walls of the school itself. We should try and create an environment where they get to learn how the rest of the world is, running, or what makes an impact in the world. Or, sometimes it helps children to be more creative, right? So in that mission, I used to take online classes and all of that. This is in 2012, where going online was considered a taboo. And a lot of my existing parents, students, and their parents were used to think that, that's not necessary, that I am actually, trying to train students using all these online tools. I would just, but it was not on a, day-to-day basis, I would take online classes, but on a monthly basis, we would invite somebody to interact with them and share our thoughts with them and so on and so forth. So that paid path where Google made me the Hyderabad Champion for Google Women Entrepreneurs on the Web, where I was helping all the other women entrepreneurs to come online with Google. So you don't have to be a coder, or you don't have to be a computer geek to be able to run your own website, was the agenda for that. While I was helping them out, they asked me, Meghna, you're doing so much. Is there anything that we can do for you? So I felt it's the modern God asking me for boons because Google can get anything happen. And so I said that we need a platform for education, and where these are the areas that I said that students can benefit better and teachers can benefit better. So they said they were working on something, but I think 6 to 8 months down the lane, they sent me a link, and we were one of the first Indian school to be mentioned by Google for Education for the ways and methodologies that we use to teach in the school. And that actually helped us during the pandemic, I should say so. When the entire world came to a standstill, and where not many schools knew about what to do further now that the entire place is shut down, I should say maybe we were the one school that did not panic at all. Because just before the pandemic, because it was an announced pandemic during the month of March, but in November or December itself is when we wanted to digitalize. So we went with Google Chromebooks for all our teachers, and we wanted to digitalize the entire place. So there were a lot of restrictions from the parents saying that, we don't want our younger children to strain their eyes and go online and learn anything, or we don't want to use the laptops yet. So I think in February is when they were able to have a communication with Google team, and they learned how it's going to help their children and all. But because of the pandemic, finally everyone agreed. All the parents, they said, okay, fine, we don't mind going online now, that because it's pandemic and we don't have any other choice. So, but we didn't want to scare them. So we wanted to introduce them step by step, because it's new to parents. And even though our teachers were trained, it was never a completely online that we haven't taken. I wanted it to be an experience where my teachers don't have to panic on how they're going to take this. So initially what we thought was okay, we are going to start and slowly introduce children how to interact online. So we created all their email IDs online on Google Classroom. And then we started interacting as a school, like conversations, because I understand when it is a new platform altogether, they can't just jump in and then, yes, the teacher can't start teaching you. So we had to make that connection with the students online, and we have to create that environment for children that this is not just fun. This is information that we are sharing with each other. And because until then, children were so used to online videos or games and all, which is mostly one way. It is only actually giving them throwing some information at them, but it was never that, it waited until they respond to it, or it was never two-way. So online education suddenly made it completely a new thing for everybody, where it is two-way communication, where you are being asked, you're given certain tasks, and the other person is expecting you to respond and all of that. Yes, it took some time, but we were there in no within very less amount of time. And then later on, because previous to that, I mean, 5-6 years before that, I was the one who would always talk about how it is important that one has to take online classes or invest in upgrading their teachers with all these technologies that they can use. So then it was not a very favorable conversations that or comments that I used to receive, saying that like people were like, oh, we've been running schools from last 30 years or 50 years. Do we not know how to run a school? Suddenly somebody with some information or studied abroad who comes in today and tells us that we have to invest in upgrading our teachers, with all these skills. So these were the comments initially. But with pandemic, all those comments turned around, and a lot of schools reached out saying, Meghna, you were mentioning about Google for Education and upgrading your teachers, how much it's going to cost us. I said, nothing. It's for free. They were surprised. And there were a couple of schools who reached out to me later on, said that we are paying a huge sum of amount so that we can actually run online classes. But thanks a lot, Meghna, with your help. And Google, with Google platform now, we are saving all of that expenses. So I felt so happy. I felt so nice that, it's not just our students, but, other schools and their teams and their teachers are being benefited out of this. But I'm sure you all would agree that online classes were a big buzzword initially, but then later on, it's not very favorable for, and it created a lot of learning gaps as well in children. So we wanted to make sure that, we are trying to make some difference here too. So yeah, initially in the beginning of this pandemic, we were on a project where our children were reviving an urban lake. I know, I'm like, shifting from one thing to another thing. But the reason why I wanted to share this is, while I was teaching them social studies, this was part of my child rights class, where I was just sharing that, all these mountains, lakes, ponds, rivers, they all belong to the next generation and their voice matters. So children were really surprised to know that. And they shared with me that, they always felt that everything belongs to either the parents or somebody else or a grown-up. They never were able to relate these things to them. And then suddenly when there's this ownership that these things belong to me, actually paved a way for us in taking up a lake revival project, which is in an urban lake, which is completely dead. So just before the pandemic, we started this. And during the pandemic also, we completed that entire project. Even though children were not able to come physically to the school, we were updating on how, their efforts are not going in vain. So for the first year, they were all quite happy that they were able to, make a difference in the society as students, and, how we use a lot of machinery to actually clean that particular lake and build a bund around it and all of that. But students actually played a major role in trying to create awareness in and around this communities, where, they tried and created that, how important all these water bodies are. So that was like, something which can keep their mind off the pandemic. And the happiest days are like, when my students actually started sharing, ma'am, they read about our project in the newspapers and they are treating me like a special child now, that, I am the reason behind that particular project. So my entire neighborhood is so proud of me and all of that. So, these are the things that I feel I live for as a teacher. So yeah, that happiness that my students and the confidence that my students today have is that, no matter what, when we are together, we will be able to come out with flying colors in whatever project that we take. So that was one of the bigger lessons that my students learned even during the pandemic.